Excited for today's session on creating engaging dashboards that are going to wow the stakeholders, whether that's leadership, the board of directors, the investors, the department heads, your accounting team, everyone in the company, hopefully, is going to leave you feeling impressed after today's session. We're going to wait just a few minutes for people to trickle in, but in the meanwhile, I do want to hear who you all are, where you're calling from. So please do let us know in the chat. What's your title, the company you represent, you're welcome to share, and where you're calling from. And while we wait, I go ahead and say that myself. All right, we got Diraj from South Africa. We got Dominic from Edinburgh, Chad from North Carolina. We got Orlando, Florida. Cool. People from all over. That is great. We got someone from Romania. Our CTO is from Romania. That's very cool. We got someone from UK, Erica. That is where our co-host Dan is from as well, who we're going to introduce just shortly. So it looks like we got people from really all around the world. And the beautiful thing about dashboards is it doesn't matter what language you speak, everyone understands a dashboard. You know the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, to me, a dashboard is worth 1,000 insights. And that's exactly what we're going to cover today. We're going to give just about one more minute. If you haven't introduced yourself, please do. I'm also going to give a quick heads up that today's session, yes, it will be recorded, and yes, it will be emailed out afterwards for all of you who registered. And then similarly, if there are any questions that you have, we're going to do our best to get through each and every single question. We want you leaving with a strong level of understanding on what we're going to be covering today. So please put that in the specific Q&A section, and we'll make sure that there is enough time afterwards to go over that. We are also going to be going over a bunch of dashboards that you're all going to be getting access to. I'll be sharing a lot of resources as well. So as we get up to that part, we will cover that. So today's session, like I was speaking about, it's all about financial reporting, right? Probably my favorite topic to talk about, whether you work in accounting, finance, FP&A, treasury, audit, tax, it doesn't really matter. Presenting information to stakeholders is one of the most valuable tasks that you can do because it allows you to move on to that strategic work. People hired you as a professional to debunk what is happening in the business. What is going to happen in the business? How do you bridge the gap? What are the inputs that they have? What are the decisions that they need to make? Where are the vulnerabilities that they need to be aware of? And it all starts with an engaging dashboard or financial report that you want to share to someone. And probably the worst line that you can hear, or maybe I'll take it even one step further, that you don't have an answer to is someone saying, where did this number come from? Now, there are other questions that could be much worse to also not have answers to. And that could be, what would it look like if we changed this? Or why does this look that way versus that looking this way? A lot of data integrity issues, which we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be going over the entire workflow. We're not just going to be talking about dashboard principles, financial reporting principles, or financial storytelling. We're going to be talking about the entire spectrum, the entire cycle from the accounting team, whether you sit on the accounting team or whether you work hand in hand with the accounting team, them preparing that information in the actual accounting software. The information then typically goes into a spreadsheet. I always like to say Excel being the number one tool for finance and accounting professionals. With that information going into a spreadsheet, you want to make sure that it's properly reconciled, that it quote unquote foots to any of the other schedules. And we'll talk about the challenges when that hasn't happened. If there's information that hasn't been reviewed or approved or confirmed by the applicable department heads, how to make sure that that information does get aligned so you're not looking at inconsistent information. Fixing those classification errors, reshaping, transforming that information, getting that into then the report that you need, and then presenting it. And hoping that people either don't ask questions or the questions that they ask, you have the answer to. We're going to be going over how to really set this up from a rock solid perspective using one of my very favorite frameworks that I've developed after developing hundreds of financial dashboards and even building a tool that automates those dashboards, which we're going to be covering with some live examples shortly. Now, a few other things to chat about, and this is probably one of the biggest concepts I want to explain. A lot of times, the issues with dashboards is not the actual data visualization. It is the data integrity that makes up that information, but even more importantly, it is the overall structure, the mechanism for how you ingested that data and how you then translated that data into a dashboard. Not only that people can understand, it's not enough to have data somewhere. We live right now in the data explosion era with everything happening with AI. Our problem is not a lack of data. Our problem is a lack of curation of that data, highlighting what the most important data points are for the respective stakeholders. And in today's session, we're going to show you how easy it is to make the mistake of potentially overwhelming your users with too much data, and instead, the right way to not only reduce that overwhelm, but most importantly, to get them to actually enjoy the information that you're presenting to them. I know it sounds weird, right? Finance and accounting to, the CEO, do they really enjoy it? But yes, when done right, you absolutely can do that. So we are going to go over first a poll. I'm curious to hear with each and every single one of you, what is the accounting software that you are using, which of course is going to affect, again, that very first part like we spoke about, where the information all originates from your accounting software. I'm curious what we're working with here, and you can go ahead and check off that information. And we'll get a feel for the crowd that we're working with today, the first of a few polls that we have. And we'll just wait a sec for people to fill out that information. All right, we'll give it a few more seconds. And it looks like David mentioned in the comments that he uses Sage 200. We got some people who are using Xero. Okay, we got a combination of Xero. I have found that QuickBooks Online is one of the most popular tools for SMBs in the US, but Xero is a lot more common in the UK, in Australia, in New Zealand, and in Canada. And we have a few other people with some ERPs that I've never heard of, which again is always the case. Deltek, CostPoint, and Blackbaud, I haven't really heard of. All right, should we see the results of the poll? I'm curious how everyone voted. Okay, so it looks like the majority of you use other, which again, that's really popular. There are just so many different options for ERPs. I remember I once connected with this company that had an interior design agency, and there was this like special ERP just for the interior design agency. And I think there are, again, just dozens and dozens of ERPs outside of the ones that we mentioned over here. So thank you, everyone, for casting your vote on that. So here's what we're going to be covering in today's session. We're going to be going over what could potentially break your dashboard before the data even gets compiled into your spreadsheet, and how to watch out for those issues so that the data integrity of the information you're presenting is non-negotiable. Because if you present data that isn't correct, that can instantly kill confidence on any other of the hard work that you actually put together. We're going to be going over the most important metrics that your board of directors, that your leadership, that investors, that department heads typically read. Though, of course, we'll see how there are exceptions to that rule. And I'll be curious to hear from all of you what those metrics are that may be different from what I present. We'll talk about how to get that real-time visibility. And similarly, how you can design your system in a way where ideally you're presenting your dashboards with minimal effort each and every single month. Because like I always enjoy talking about, this is something that really helped me this experience that I had. I once met with a coaching client, and it was very evident based off of how she was feeling. She was very overwhelmed. The CEO was coming to visit. She had a lot on her plate. She was new to the role, and there were data integrity issues. It was very evident to me that the number one issue that I see with finance and accounting professionals, it is not a capabilities issue. It is oftentimes a capacity issue. A lot of times we're chasing down receipts. We're trying to classify information. We're trying to book adjustments. We're trying to export something into Excel. We're trying to adjust the rows, reformat all that information. Each of those items add minutes and minutes each time that you do that task. And those minutes and minutes add up to hours, to days, to even weeks each and every single month. So what I want to introduce later on in this session is a framework for how you could ideally automate as much of that information as possible so there is minimal effort each and every single month in order to allow you to present the information accordingly to each of the stakeholders. Because ideally, you want to give that transparency to the relevant people. You want to make sure that you have the right controls in place so that you're not sharing the wrong information with the right person, so that you're not sharing data that you don't realize has an actual error in place. And yes, there are systems that you can install in order to prevent that. We'll also be going over one of my favorite different dashboard styles and the different mechanisms for compiling dashboards and the things that you need to be aware of with each dashboard. So for those of you who aren't familiar with me, welcome. My name is Josh. I am a fractional CFO for a number of fast-growing companies. I started my firm, Mighty Digits, about 6.5 years ago. I never dreamed, as I started posting content on social media, initially just to drive more awareness of our accounting firm, I never dreamed that it would turn into an entirely separate brand that you see over here, Your CFO Guy. For those of you who are familiar with me, who found me through social media or through my email list, it is so great to have you back on this webinar. And kudos to you for investing in your career and joining us for today's session. Now, on top of the fact that I've grown an accounting firm and now this agency that teaches and shares thought leadership content around finance and accounting, I am a total dashboards nerd. You probably already know this if you are familiar with my content. I have explored building each and every single possible combination of metrics into a dashboard in all these different formats, so much so that I've even created my own tool, an Excel add-in called ModelWiz, where you can generate these beautiful dashboards with a click of a button connected to either QuickBooks Online or Xero, which is what we just launched recently. More ERPs to actually come. I'm also a proud Microsoft MVP. For those of you who are in Seattle, next week, I'm going to be in your stomping grounds as I attend the MVP Summit at Microsoft's headquarters. And it has been an amazing experience being able to connect with Microsoft's team and really understand what's going on behind the curtain with everything Excel, because again, to me, Excel is the number one tool for finance and accounting professionals. Now, maybe you're using Power BI, another Microsoft product. Maybe you're using Looker or Tableau. Either way, the concepts that we're going to be talking about today will be applied for all of those platforms. Now, thankfully, we are joined by a co-host, and that is the company ApprovalMax, who was nice enough to sponsor today's webinar. And a huge, huge thank to our sponsors for keeping these webinars entirely free for you guys so that you could maximize the actual value. Now, this is actually my second time working with ApprovalMax. I worked with them last year, and we had a really great time on that webinar. So it is an honor to be working with them again, specifically you, Dan, calling us from the UK. Dan, I'll let you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and ApprovalMax.
Thank you very much, Josh. And hi, everyone. It's great to be here again. Yes, the previous time was quite fun, and hopefully this one will be even better. I am the CFO and COO of ApprovalMax. ApprovalMax is effectively an accounts payable accounting software provider, so a SaaS company. We are based out of the UK, but we operate globally. Our software integrates with QBO, Xero, and NetSuite. And yes, I'm very much looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have around how to make sure that the dashboards we build reflect and present accurate and reliable data.
Likewise, Dan, and I'm excited also in a little bit as we go through these slides and the content to hear what you're seeing with the customers you work with, or more specifically, given that you're in the CFO position, how do you guys manage all of this? So I'm excited to hear directly from you. And like I was sharing earlier, I really want to capture the full reporting cycle here. We're going to get into the meat and potatoes. We're going to go through a live workflow in an Excel file where you're all going to get free access to some of my very favorite dashboards in a financial model, but I first want to talk about how exactly that data originates. Now, I remember I once worked with this client and they were paying our company $15,000 a month, $180,000 a year. They were growing very, very fast. They just raised like a $20 million Series A, and they had a lot of need for shaping, transforming, fixing, cleaning all of their data. But the problem was, and this is something that I really want to instill in all of you, there was a blocker where no matter what we did, we weren't able to deliver the value that they were paying for, no matter how hard we worked. And that is because the data itself was flawed. The information from their accounting software conflicted with the information from their database, which also conflicted with the data that they had from their vendors as they were a marketplace. And when all three of those data points conflict, you're building on quicksand. It's close to impossible to actually deliver the insights that you need if there's an inherent flaw in the data itself. Now, usually where that data actually breaks down depends on how large your organization is. I see companies who are just starting out. They maybe have just the CEO, the founder. Maybe they have a few contractors or employees. Maybe they don't even have an accounting system in place yet. And it's fairly simple, the reporting needs that they have. Maybe they're just checking their bank balance each and every single month. Maybe they are putting together a rough P&L themselves using something like AI or a spreadsheet on their own. That could work. But like many things in a finance and accounting function, as the company grows, typically past you're working with 10 vendors on a monthly basis, past a few hundred transactions each and every single month, well, now you need to have a proper accounting software in place. And I would just ask this question last week from a founder who is raising a really large round of capital, who is doing everything on his own just with spreadsheets and AI. And he was saying, well, why do we even need an accounting software in place? And I'm sure many of you are going to nod your head thinking of the answer that I told him. The idea is that with the right software, like an accounting platform, whether that's a full-blown ERP or whether that's just in a basic accounting platform, you have a consolidated piece of technology that allows you to sync in your transactions, classify those transactions, whether that's by category, whether that's by class, location, vendor, customer, receipt. You can then reconcile that information, proving to people that the bank balances, the credit card balances that you're reporting actually match. You could then book adjusting journal entries, especially under accrual accounting, to produce your financial reports with the proper chart of accounts. You can slice and dice those reports, all of that with just a few clicks. Now, I love Excel, don't get me wrong, but this is one of the areas where Excel becomes outdated very, very quickly. With a proper accounting software in place, which honestly is less than $100 a month, you have all of your reporting needs for the most part dialed in. But one thing that I feel that accounting softwares don't do well is really engaging reporting, whether that's via a beautiful dashboard with a company's color scheme, whether that is with inputs that allow you to then project out into the future with a financial model. That's typically where I see accounting softwares break down. So in today's session, I want to go over how to move past just an Excel sheet, how to move past just an accounting software. And we're going to be talking about a number of different areas. Again, that concept that we spoke about, right? The data integrity, the garbage in and garbage out, how to actually prevent problems before they surface 5 steps down the line. We'll go over those favorite metrics. We'll talk about the dashboard types that are my favorite because, yes, there are different schemas to your data that will affect your dashboards. We'll talk about the framework that I was speaking about earlier, the Excel SIP framework, where you can instantly refresh your data each and every single month as you invest in creating the proper infrastructure. And then finally, we'll talk about some dashboard formulas that you need to be aware of in order to enhance all of your dashboard capabilities. So let's start specifically with our garbage in and garbage out principle. And I want to launch a poll first as we're going over this slide to understand which of these typically provide the biggest challenge for you in the month-end close process. Because like we were talking about, there are a number of parts in the month-end close process that can cause a lot of time and effort in order to produce the information that is going to go into your dashboards. Now, people sync in the data from their credit card and from their bank. That data could either be a normal transaction or a credit card transaction, or it could be a bill. And the bills need to go through a whole process in which they're getting approved, in which they're getting monitored, they're getting coded correctly, they're getting pushed through, and then they're being paid. And then ultimately, you have these journal entries, right? You're booking those adjustments, especially again under accrual accounting, in order to properly reflect what the difference is between what your income statement shows, what your balance sheet shows, and how that feeds into your cash flows. And even those companies who are on the cash basis, well, they still may have some adjusting journal entries, specifically if we're talking about inventory or CapEx or a number of other areas that can still affect your business. So I'd be curious, as people are filling out this poll, I also want to ask you, Dan, with your job as a CFO, which one of these buckets tend to take the most amount of effort and cause the most amount of headache?
Fair question. I mean, look, obviously, all three of them are problematic, but I think if you're looking for the biggest, I would say the first for two main reasons. And I have to admit that for us as a business, it's less of a problem because, well, obviously, we use our own product and our own product solves this problem rather effectively. But it tends to be the bigger problem of the three for most businesses that I've come across for two main reasons. One is just sheer volume. I mean, you have so much more over the first than the second and the third. And the other is, and I think that's the more important point, the second and the third are contained within the finance team. So you have a lot more control over that. In the first, you are actually depending on other parts of the business, and they may not understand or appreciate why this is important, and they may not cooperate as quickly, as fully, and as effectively as you might hope. And that creates a lot of frustration.
For sure. I'm curious to see how people voted if those results are ready. I'm going to share my thoughts on what takes the most amount of time for me, and that is definitely the adjusting journal entries for me. Because that's when you have to have either a separate piece of software or an Excel file. You need to understand how exactly to amortize the values. You need to make sure that the data ultimately fits, that your calculations are correct. So adjusting journal entries to me, like this to me is the heart and soul of an actual month-end close process. But it looks like the majority of you said it's pretty much all of the above, which I guess could make sense, right? The month-end close process is really difficult. For those of you who are working in FP&A, who don't necessarily have a formal accounting background, I want to challenge you to really understand how a month-end close is performed. I can promise you, it'll be one of the most valuable skill sets that you add to your career because in your job with presenting data to the stakeholders, with controlling the actual projections that are then going to get presented in those board meetings, you really want to understand how did that originate? What is that difference between cash versus accrual accounting? You also want to establish a relationship with accounting because, again, they're the ones in control of the data. If they don't have the data ready, well, you're going to be paralyzed with your ability to then present and deliver those strategic values and insights. So, with our first principle out of the way, let's now talk about what are the most important metrics for a business. Now, I want each of you to think about what would be your result, right? I'm going to present 8 metrics in just a second to all of you, but I want you to ask yourself, what are those most important metrics? These are mine. First and foremost, it's revenue. Now, some companies may instead want to do book sales. Some companies may want to do MRR. Some companies want to do ARR, monthly recurring or annual recurring revenue. No, those are not the same. All 4 of those are distinct metrics, but they all tell you how fast is the company growing. Now, everything originates, of course, with sales. Even if you're a pre-revenue company, eventually you need to be able to generate money. Now, in order to actually deliver that revenue, you have costs. And us finance and accounting professionals, we call that cost of goods sold. Now, don't mistake this with a development cost. The easiest test that I always like to say for cost of goods sold is, if this cost were to go away, can I still deliver my product or service to my customers? So, for example, if you are a manufacturing company and you no longer had the ability to source a certain key material in your product or service, will you be able to deliver your product or service? Well, the answer to that is no. So it's a cost of goods sold. If you are a SaaS platform and one of your engineers who is responsible for developing more new features, if they quit can you still deliver your product or service? Well, most likely your app would still be up and running. You may not be able to handle bugs. You may not be able to add additional resources, but that to me would be an operating expense rather than a cost of goods sold. All right. After our revenue and cost of goods sold, we then want to understand our first calculated metric on our profit and loss. There are 4 calculated metrics that show up on our profit and loss. The first one being our gross profit. And on top of gross profit, we have the other way of looking at it, and that's the gross margin. So this gross profit helps me understand, all right, now that we had a sale, I'm not going to look at the top line. I'm going to look at now how much money do I have to either reinvest back into the business or to pay out to the owners of the business. And your gross margin tells you the percentage of each sale that allows you to, again, reinvest or pay out to the owners. So if you have a negative gross margin, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you don't have a business. Now, I've seen companies sometimes have negative gross margins, and as they accomplish economies of scales, that ultimately grows. But to me, this is one of the reasons why I love software companies, right? Their gross margins are in the 90+% range. It's incredible just how efficient they are and how much that helps them with everything else they're able to deliver in the form of resources to the company. Now, I got a few of these other metrics over here. We got our operating expenses. The operating expenses help us understand the actual cost to operate our business. So that's where we have a lot of the sales and marketing, the customer support, the research and development, the G&A. Then we get to our bottom line profitability metric, our net income. Take all of my income, all of my expenses, and what does that bring me? And then, of course, this is just looking at it from the lens of a P&L. Cash is most commonly referred to as king. So we want to understand how much cash went in versus cash went out. And then finally, how much cash do we have in the bank? Now, again, you may want to customize some of this, right? You may want to calculate your customer acquisition costs if you're a software company, maybe your average order value if you're an e-commerce company, maybe your working capital ratio if money is actually tight. But these to me are the 8 most important metrics. And I'm curious, again, Dan, from a CFO's perspective, are these the 8 metrics that you also would agree that you guys use, or do you use a different metric?
We use different ones. I mean, some correlate, but I think most are quite different. But I think that's not surprising because I don't think there's a right or wrong here. These would vary between business to business based on 2 main things, I think. One is the type of business that you are. I mean, this would be great for a traditional business. We are a SaaS business, so obviously things like ARR, CAC, Rule of 40 figure a lot more prominently in our dashboards. The other is also, I think, the state and the stage of the business you're in. So whether you're a very early stage and growing very rapidly, or whether you're established and aiming towards profitability, then even within the same metrics universe, some things become more important than others. And one thing I would say there is, I've seen this happen many a time, is you define a certain set of KPIs and metrics and you start reporting on them, and then you don't stop to re-examine that periodically to say, okay, our situation as a business has changed. We have grown, we have developed, the ecosystem has changed, the industry has changed. Maybe we should revisit our choice of key metrics to better align with the new situation. Sometimes you just got stuck in your ways, and then you're looking at the numbers, which is great, but you're looking at the wrong numbers. So I would encourage everyone to refresh that thinking now and then.
I'm excited also to go over this specific dashboard in just a few minutes as we share the Excel file and walk you guys through some live examples. But what I love about this dashboard is, again, talking about that data overwhelm. I'm just presenting 8 metrics. I'm saying, hey, get a huge 90% of what you need to know about this business. It's all presented in these 8 metrics. And the numbers over here are the biggest, but if you want to compare against the prior period, against the prior year, against the budget, I have that in smaller text with helpful markers, with helpful colors. A lot of really great things happening in this dashboard. But this dashboard is really just, to me, one of 3 dashboard types that you can be working with. Now, hear me out over here. The first dashboard type that we're working with is what I like to call a reporting dashboard. And this is by default how most reports come out of an accounting software. You have your accounts on your vertical axis. You have your dates on your horizontal axis, and then the values show up in the middle. Now, again, accounting softwares usually don't have the information presented in this pretty format. They usually don't help you actually create the infrastructure for a financial model where you can project, but the concept still stays the same. We have all of our dates going across this way, our accounts going across vertically, and the information over here. Now, the three most common reports in this format, again, it's the three financial statements, right? Where it all stems from, the profit and loss, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows. Another report, which is especially common as you start working in Power BI, as you start working in these other data visualization tools like Looker or like Tableau, is you have a huge table of structured data. That structured data then gets presented via a pivot table, where in this case, we have the capability of filtering for any period or department, and you have a pivot table profit and loss. Now, I have a video in this example where I'm going to just share in a bit how to construct this. This is something that I built about 2 years ago. It was a really fun project for me, building a pivot table profit and loss, what I call the world's greatest pivot table. And you can get access to the template, of course, for free, which I'll share in just a few minutes. And then finally, this third dashboard is what I like to call a KPI dashboard, right? Because we don't have data in a structured range like this in a pivot table. We don't have it in a semi-structured format like you see for most accounting platforms. Instead, it's really up to you as to how you want to present your data. In this case, I have these 8 metrics that I'm showing across these 8 KPI cards. So why don't we launch another poll, because I'm curious what everyone thinks. What is your favorite type of dashboard? Is it a reporting dashboard? Is it a pivot table dashboard? Or is it a KPI dashboard? And while we're doing that, I'm curious, Dan, which one of these dashboard formats is most common with ApprovalMax?
Well, we've kind of taken option 3 to the next level, I would say, in the sense that we work extensively with KPI dashboards, but they're more visual than that, and they're literally graphs. We found, and there's a lot of research on that, that most people digest and ingest data better when it's visualized. So within the finance team, you'll find more of the first and the second, clearly. But when we're presenting to management and mainly to the board, we have dedicated dashboards that are a lot more visual in nature to allow people to understand the story behind the numbers more easily.
Nice. And to your point, we're definitely going to be covering graphs when we go over the live Excel walkthrough in just a few minutes. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the framework that I promised you all earlier for how to structure your Excel files. So you're not ending up like that coaching client, like I was speaking about earlier, who was overwhelmed and had a capacity issue because every month she was downloading the information, transforming the information, making the edits, clicking this button, checking that button. It was taking a few hours just to get the reports, let alone the time, the actual energy drain that it brings you. And it's what I like to call the Excel SIP framework. And here's the idea. Every workbook needs to have your data segregated into 3 different categories. You need to have your source data for where your information lives, and that is typically what comes directly from your accounting software or your headcount platform or your CRM or any other external database. You bring that into your Excel file exactly as it looks. You then have a separate tab, which I'm going to be showing you shortly in my Excel file, that allows you to ultimately work with these inputs. And you could potentially attach drivers, headcount projections, growth rates, a revenue build, whatever you want. These are the inputs that allow you to then get to your final result. And then finally, you want to have tabs that are just read-only. They're just presentations. These are your actual dashboards. These are your actual reports. Now, maybe you have a toggle. Maybe you can flip to a different class or to a different period. But ultimately, when you keep these 3 separate, all you're doing each month is you're taking this information from your source location and you're refreshing that with new data. And you're just copying and pasting once you set this up. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Power Query, Power Query allows you to take that source data and gets it even more manageable, editable, scalable, so that you can then attach your inputs. So let me show you what this looks like in person. Again, we're talking about our sources. And I'm going to be showing this to you in our Excel file in just 2 slides. But the idea is over here, I have an unpivoted view of my profit and loss. That gets attached to a drivers tab, which pulls in my historicals and makes it really easy to then project out my projections. And finally, it gets presented in a KPI dashboard. Every single month, all I need to do is refresh these tables here. When that table gets refreshed, my inputs, if I'm happy with, I can keep as is, or I could slightly tweak, and my dashboard stays updated. Now, Bushra asked a question over here. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Is this in 3 separate files? No, it is in 1 file. And as a reminder, if you do have a question, just put that in the Q&A because I want to make sure I get to all of them. The idea is each of these are separate tabs. So I'm curious, do you guys do something like this, Dan, whenever you're presenting your data where you have it separately from different sources?
Yeah, very soon. I couldn't agree with you more on the approach. I tend to separate it into 4 parts, which I call the DACO framework. So data, assumptions, calculations, and outputs. Now, you usually just present the outputs because people don't necessarily want to see what's inside the sausage, nor do they necessarily understand. They just want to see the outcomes. And it depends on your target audience as well. But I think that the separation between data and assumptions is also helpful because data is stuff that you can verify, you can prove, you can source, you can point a finger at, this is where I got this data, it's hard fact, right? Assumptions is where you sit down and you have the meaningful conversations with the people that are making forward-looking decisions, usually the management, around different areas of the business on what they think the business is going to perform like in the future. And so separating the data from the assumptions allows you to basically have those conversations in a clearer fashion.
Agreed. And we're going to do that walkthrough right after this slide over here so you can see that in practice. But I first want to talk about the most common formulas that I use, which again, I have a dedicated YouTube video just towards these dashboard formulas. And the idea is with the right formula and the right cell referencing, it becomes really easy to edit your information with whatever you want. The most common formulas that I use from this list is a sum ifs, where I can take a detailed profit and loss and condense it into a beautiful summarized profit and loss. An X lookup, when I want to do a lookup of a single precise value, maybe based off of the account as well as the date. I like to also use the EO month function in order to help me with dates because dates are such a big part of finance and accounting. We'll see how that all works. And then finally, the text function is really good for allowing you to control the actual date format. So let's now have some fun in Excel, everybody. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share this link and everyone can then download this file directly. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to say anyone can view. Over here, grab the Excel file. Oops, that is wrong data. I thought I copied. Just give me 1 sec. And I'm also going to switch my screen share to the file over here. All right, let me try sharing this one more time. Here we go. Anyone with the link can view, and let's copy that link. All right, grab the Excel file. Okay, you should be able to access from this file. Go ahead and check that out. And it looks like people are starting to join. All right, so here's what I want to do. First and foremost, if you want to download this, just hit the file button. There should be like a save as or a download a copy, and you can get that access automatically. Now, just a reminder, I put this information together using our tool Model Wiz. For those of you who use QuickBooks Online or Xero, you could actually get this connected to your data entirely for free and wow your decision makers. But this is what I was talking about, right? Let's think of that SIP framework. Here I have an unpivoted profit and loss and an unpivoted balance sheet. Now, think of this like a trial balance, only a trial balance typically has information as of one specific point in time. What this does is this has a trial balance stitched together for each and every single period from the start of my model till the end. And here's my income statement, my balance sheet, and then we have a little like account mappings column. which again is something that we automate from our tool. Now look at what I do, right? This drivers tab is what allows me to pull in all of those historical values and leave placeholders for all of my projections. And what I love is I could easily, right now, this is just saying the prior month, I could change this to a 3-month average and the information automatically updates, or I could say that I want this to, let's say, be a monthly assumption, and I'm going to change this to $5,000. And as you can see, everything directly updates. So this makes it so easy for you to just change any of the drivers that you want. Or again, this is Excel, right? I can just come in over here and I can say that this is going to be custom. And I can say 1,000 in this month, 2,500 in the next month. And the key thing here is, remember, this is now that middle part of the SIP framework. We have the sources in the source tables and the PBC tables. The drivers attaches it, allows me to put my inputs. And now let's look at these beautiful dashboards, right? We got this KPI dashboard that I was showing you earlier. Now, the beauty of this dashboard is, again, I'm just showing 8 metrics, but I can compare against a prior period. I can compare against a prior year. I can change it from this month. Look at what happens when I change it, right? Cash is showing 90,821. Let's just say I change this to last quarter. Look at what happens. This now defaults to a K format because it's using that text function that we spoke about. This now changed to Q3 2025. I'm comparing against Q2 and Q3 as well. All of that information is then updating automatically. And if I had a budget, I of course could attach that as well. So this one KPI dashboard, you now get to see in place based off of everything, again, that I'm putting through this drivers tab. But that's just one dashboard. Remember, we talked about KPI dashboards. I also like to talk about reporting dashboards like you see over here. And what I love about this is, like I spoke about, I have the ability to condense my profit and loss into a format much easier to read than a full profit and loss with hundreds. Sometimes I even see profit and losses with thousands of lines. Do not send that to a stakeholder. They're going to be overwhelmed so easily. And look at what I have over here, right? I have the ability to see my historicals, my projections, all the information for whether it's an actual or a projection, my balance sheet, my cash flows, all that information is automatically flowing. Now look at what I have here, right? On my drivers, I have the information all the way at the bottom. And as you can see, I added $1 million in contributed capital. That $1 million flowed through into my summary financials. Now, instead of that, I could also expand to showcase values on a trailing 12-month or year-to-date basis, on an annual basis, on a quarterly basis. These are all using consistent formulas. So whatever date I have in my column, I'm pulling the right information automatically. Now, we spoke about the importance of cash flows, right? Here's another view. This time, like Dan said, we're getting the opportunity to showcase a combination of charts and tables. And again, everything here is dynamic. I'm showing 2026, but you know what? Maybe I want to change this. Maybe I want to show it for the trailing 12-month period. All the information automatically updates tied to my drivers tab. And we have more, right? We got this sales dashboard, another chart showing a bar chart, trailing 12 months. I can, again, toggle this to any other period that I want. Let's say I want to just show 2025. Everything directly updates. Or maybe I want to show this for 2026. And I can see the comparison against the prior year, as well as all of these KPI cards. Now, if we're talking about my favorite report, again, if any of you have followed my content, you know the number one report to me, if I'm presenting to the board of directors, I only have one report that I could show. By far, it's going to be this budget versus actuals. Because this helps me gain that confidence from the board of directors, where I can have a story for them, where I say, this is what I thought was going to happen. This is what actually took place. This is the delta, the percentage delta, the number delta. This is why it matters. These are decisions that we need to take. You don't need zero variances, but you do need a story behind each and every single one of these dashboards. So I hope that you guys enjoy this Excel file. Again, for those of you who are using QuickBooks or Xero, You can streamline and get this connected to your data. At the end of today's session, I'm going to share a playlist link where I show you how to build pretty much every single one of these dashboards from scratch if you want. But first, before we get to our Q&A, we are going to wrap up today's session with a few more notes. And this over here is a recap. We spoke about so many different things. Would you agree that if your data integrity is in place, it makes everything a lot more flexible in order to actually work with? Would you agree that with the proper controls, the proper frameworks and systems in place, you're able to reduce the manual work that you need to do each and every single month so you could focus more on those strategic insights? And would you agree that with gaining the confidence from those stakeholders, that can only mean good things for the business, for your personal career, and for everything else? I would love to hear all of what you say over here. And as we do that, we have three things that I want you to remember. Again, your dashboards are only as good as the data that you actually feed in. The right framework allows you to save time with the Excel SIP framework for those 8 metrics that we already spoke about so that you can present them to stakeholders and gain those confidence. And with the right reporting structure, whether that's a KPI dashboard, a summary, or a reporting dashboard, or a pivot table dashboard, you get the opportunity ultimately to really deliver any information that you want. Now we're going to do one last poll over here, and that is if you would like to learn more about how ApprovalMax can help you with getting your data integrity ultimately in place. Dan, is there anything that you want to share on this before we wrap up the poll and then go to our Q&A?
Oh, just to add that, kind of at the risk of kind of stating the obvious, it all starts with the validity and veracity of your data. And if you make sure that the data process starts with good foundations and everything is approved and accounted for and audited and tracked correctly, then you're building on a good foundation. To your point earlier, you don't want to build on quicksand, right? So you want a really solid foundation for whatever you present. This is where it starts, and this is exactly what our product excels at helping businesses do.
Love it. Well, you guys have all been very patient. You've been a phenomenal crowd. Let's get to all your questions. If you posted a question in the chat, if you don't mind just doing me a favor, posting that in the Q&A so we can go in the order, that would be fantastic. Let's start with Jay's question. Is this integrated with any other agentic tools or models? I'm assuming that you mean you're talking about the file that I shared with you. It's just integrated with QuickBooks Online and Xero, but the principles apply to any piece of technology that you are actually working with. All right, Daniel has a question. How can I make it work if I work in the construction/development industry? We have a lot of CapEx. Well, Daniel, the beauty of working with a file utilizing this framework, I can go back and show you again what I was talking about in the file. It doesn't matter what you have flowing through to your financial statements. The key is to get your data from the source, like we have here, right? Where you have all of your income statement data, all of your balance sheet data. So this is where your CapEx would actually come in. And that allows you then to take advantage of all of this information. So over here, you can see that I also have CapEx, right? I have over here, furniture, computers, right? I can just change this to a amount plus 10,000. And on at my cash flows now, you should see in January 2026, an amount sitting in my cash from investing activities, because that's exactly what this is. See, there you go, that 10,000. So I hope that answers your question, Daniel. Again, it doesn't matter. Your income statement or balance sheet should all flow through into your workbook. Let's go over some more questions. Tom, can this be adapted to show sales per location or product? Yes, it can. That is a little bit more complex, but what you ultimately do is you don't just bring in the data by the account. You see over here, I have these columns for class and class ID. You would now have a new row for every combination of information by your general ledger and by the class ID or location ID or actual product ID. And in terms of our tool specifically, we do support class and location tracking for QuickBooks Online and Xero, but not product just yet. All right, Tiffany, do you have something similar to a project-specific type of reporting? I do. And again, it goes back to that conversation that I was just having on Tom's question. You would pull in the information by class and class ID, and you would then be able to toggle to each different class as you have your information set up, and you can slice and dice your data however you want. I'm going to shortly share a link to a bunch of YouTube videos. I have a YouTube video specifically on class and departmental reporting that may be helpful for you to learn how to set that up yourself. Okay, Kafiro has a question. Can we achieve perfect dashboards when you're using integrated systems? I like to believe that you can, right? If you're able to utilize the principles that we spoke about, I would think so. But if you have any other questions, just let me know. Oh, I'm working for a startup using QuickBooks Online. I need to move from reporting dashboards to KPI dashboards. Do you have resources on how I can do that? Well, again, if you download the file that I used, you can try out our tool directly, or you could always just type in on add-ins model whiz, and you'll be able to connect your data directly to your QuickBooks Online account and generate these KPI dashboards. But more importantly, regardless whether you're using QuickBooks Online or Xero, my goal is to equip you with the skill set, with the knowledge, with the tools that you need to be able to build this on your own, though you're welcome to skip that and use any piece of software that you'd like. William, I work with a power generation company backed by a PE. Can I configure it to meet my PE/investor requirements? This is a huge reason why I'm such a big believer that Excel is the most important tool for finance and accounting, for financial models, and for dashboards. The beauty of Excel is you can customize this to whatever data that you want. In this example over here, this is a KPI dashboard, right? I can just change this to say sales, and the information automatically then flows through, or rather it should flow through. Should be, yep, see now it says sales over here. You would just pull in whatever metrics you want, type in whatever values that you want. Everything would automatically get updated directly from there. Excel is the most flexible tool, and it's what people understand the most. So I hope, William, that answers your question. Tiffany, does it automatically update when you add a new GL account or class, department, etc.? That is the heart and soul of our tool. It detects new accounts, it surgically adds them, it doesn't overwrite any of your existing data, it'll bring in the relevant information all with just one click. Okay, rule about the PPC tables. The format's matted here because I don't have a Xero or good other platform. I can extract my data monthly manually. You are more than welcome to pull in your data in a reporting format like you see here. You just have to be a little bit more creative on how you set up your formulas. Over here, I like having it in an unpivoted view, which again, you can use with Power Query, and I have tons of videos on my YouTube channel that allow you to do that. It's just not as easy to set up those formulas in that format. This is what we call a structured table reference. And this structured table reference makes it really easy with just a sum ifs to get your data updated. What you actually may not have noticed is I actually have this hidden tab called Data Summary, which allows me to convert my data from this easy to access format to this reporting view that you see over here, which is what I actually have for all of my dashboards. And look, it's a very simple sum ifs, right? I'm just bringing in all of that data. My drivers is pulling directly from that with a sum ifs as well. So it just makes it a little bit easier to do it that way, though you can certainly, if you study the formulas that I have here, get it in that other format. Guys, these are really, really great, engaging questions. Please do keep them coming. We got about 7 more minutes, and I hope to get to each and every single one of them. Looks like we only have actually one more question. Anonymous attendee says, wonderful set of information shared. Thank you. Well, thank you. Have to admit, some of it was overload and I struggled to keep up. I hear you. And I can understand in any webinar, there's a lot of information. We only have an hour, but yes, all the information will be shared. That answers your question, Evelyn, as well. And you can update that. Zach asked a really good question. What does PBC stands for? Well, for those of you who know, who come from public accounting, you know that PBC stands for prepared by client. So I just use that same terminology to show that it's not something that came from me. For those of you who want to know how to build these dashboards, learn how to build all of these dashboards via my YouTube channel here. There you go. I'm going to go ahead and share that. I think we got through all of the questions. I don't know if there are any other questions that we have. I'm just going to scroll up. I think all of this is working. If any of you had any issues with this here, just send me an email. Our support team should be able to get you this file. I'm just looking at all the other questions, and I think we're in good shape. Oh, we got a few more over here. How do you deal with multi-currency? It's a good question. Most accounting softwares, although they capture the information in multi-currencies, will then translate it into a home-based currency. So that is what I would suggest for how you actually do that information to get it linked in over here. If you have multiple currencies, I haven't really seen different views for different currencies, so I would really just suggest that you translate them into a home-based currency instead. Dominic asks, do you integrate with Xero? That is exactly what we do. We just launched our Xero integration, and ApprovalMax also integrates with Xero. So you can try both of us integrating with your Xero data. Are there any other questions? These are not dashboards, just Excel templates that we are already using. I'm not sure what you mean by that. To me, I would look at this as a dashboard that you could easily go ahead and present. This is a Excel file that you would, of course, edit, and these are the outputs to those dashboards. Did I miss how you do year-to-date comparisons? Well, we have a number of different mechanisms. What you're ultimately doing is you're pulling in your values by each of these formulas. As long as you have the dates being pulled in, it's the same formula that you're using in order to allow you to compare. If I want to do year-to-date over here, I can just change this drop-down. And the drop-down for year-to-date shows over here. And as you can see now, it shows the year-to-date compared to prior period and prior year. Okay, let's just see a bunch of other questions in the Q&A. Is there a link for the dashboard template? Yes, Stephanie, that is in the access that I shared in the chat. The difference between your tool and something like Sift, I can't really speak so much to Sift, but I believe Sift is not an Excel native tool, whereas our tool specifically is. What do you mean by GL? GL stands for General Ledger. That is all the information coming from your accounting software. Zach, our fiscal year starts from August to July. That is very common, I believe, in Australia. And yes, our tool supports, you can just change the fiscal offset and then the information, instead of you showing 2024, 2025, based off of these periods, would update and would pull in reportedly. Unfortunately, Kevin, this file specifically does not allow for consolidations. Our tool does not. But if you utilize the tools and principles that we spoke about, it can. Daniel just says QuickBooks as a question. QuickBooks is something that both ApprovalMax and ModelWiz supports. Angela, thank you so much for joining. I'm glad that you were able to access this. William said he's unable to download the file. I'm sorry to hear that, William, but you can just email us, support@yourcfoguide.com. We're pretty good with our response times. Guys, we got 2 minutes left. Are there any other questions that I can help with? How do you manage old months in your growing data set of trial balances? Well, the idea is, again, this isn't exactly a trial balance. You pull in all historical months and you pull in the historical months, you enter in values and projection months. Think of this like a number of trial balances stitched together. That's why a trial balance is a little bit limited, because you only have one view. This brings in all the historical data. So thank you, Mutha. I'm glad that you enjoyed this session. I think that really comes up with everything. We got 2 more minutes. Jaden, are we going to integrate with other softwares? Eventually, we are looking to a Sage integration. I will come back to you on that. Javier, thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Dan, is there anything else that you want to share before we end today's session?
No, thank you. I think it was great. I was busy answering a few of the questions that were raised in the Q&A. So yeah, good questions and great participation. And thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Well, I had a really nice time. Thank you, everyone, for, again, taking some time, investing in your career, learning the fundamentals of how to build a beautiful dashboard. There's so much more we could have gotten into. We could have dived deeper into budget versus actuals, variance analysis, design principles, financial storytelling. But all that is maybe for our next webinar. So thank you all for joining, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next one. Take care, everyone. And don't forget to check out ApprovalMax, and a huge thanks again for them sponsoring today's session.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.